September 6th meeting to order. We do not have the minutes. We'll have the minutes at the next meeting. We've got about 10 minutes before Buford gets here, so if we can do everything in 10 minutes, we'll not have to listen to him talk about his density calculations and get out an hour and a half early. So keep moving. But in seriousness, item A has requested to be postponed. So I don't see anybody in the, one person and two people in the audience. So if anybody's here for the zoning request out on the intersection of County Road 13 and Fairhope Avenue, that has been put off until further notice.
All right.
So with that said, the first item on the agenda is item B, SD 1831, a 3-lot minor subdivision.
Thank you. All right, this is,
Excuse me, Nancy?
Yes.
Would you pick the microphone up a little bit, please?
sure. This is a public hearing to consider the request of Moore Engineering for the plat approval of Coromay Place, a 3-lot minor subdivision. The subject property is 6.19 acres. The property is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of 13 and County Road 44. The largest lot is 3.1 acres, and the smallest is 1.45 acres. The property owners are Ms. Cora May and Mr. Bryce McMurray. The surveyor representing them is Mr. Seth Moore of Moore Engineering. The property is unzoned in Baldwin County, and there's currently a house on the property and 2 outbuildings. The house was built in approximately 1978, according to Baldwin County records. And the applicant has said he's going to have the outbuildings removed from the property. A couple of the major issues, and actually they're not issues, that we've worked with Richard Peterson with regards to.
Is your mic on?
Yes. No, it's on.
Okay.
There are a couple of issues that are, that we worked with the applicant. There's getting water to the site on that lot 3 is a difficult. It would require some aid to construction costs, and the applicant has chosen to use a water well in that location. And if they had chosen water, there would be a requirement for a fire hydrant and fire markers. So if they end up using water at that location at a later date, those will be required. And then the other is the sidewalks. They have requested a waiver. On one of those pictures on the site, you will see that there is a rather large ditch. Again, this is in Baldwin County, so they have authority over the sidewalks. And as we've gone through before, on many of these, they will not maintain those sidewalks. They've sent us an email to that effect. So the conditions of approval is the applicant, and also Richard Johnson requested that the applicant not have more than 2 access points on Twin Beach Road. So that's a condition of approval. Sidewalks shall be installed unless a waiver is approved by Planning Commission is a condition of approval. And we just want it noted in the record that if they chose water to put it on on city water, they would be required to have blue markers and a fire hydrant.
Thank you, Nancy. Seth, do you have anything you want to add on behalf of the applicant?
Again, my name is Seth Moore. The only thing that I would add is we've already added on a note that they're putting in a little common ingress-egress easement on the east side of Lot 2, and that Lot 2 and Lot 3 will share that as an access to County Road 44. The only other thing that I would like to add is that.
You mean Lot 2 and Lot 1?
Is it Lot 1? Okay, I couldn't see it. But the lot's on the east side there,
Yes,
not on the
correct.
corner, has an easement on it. The only other thing I would add is that the county, the widths of these lots would not require sidewalks if they were inside, just out in the county alone. Because of the width, they would not require sidewalks.
You know, you're speaking to Mr. Sidewalk right here.
Yes, sir.
I have one question for you. The staff report said that water, was that for lot 3?
Yes, sir.
But then a fire hydrant wouldn't be required if they use a well, but it would be required if they use city water.
Correct. If they wanted to hook up to city water, then they would be required to put in a fire hydrant down 13. But he's decided that he's going to use a well on that lot because he's probably going to build on that lot
So the
himself.
fire hydrant wouldn't be a requirement regardless, okay. Okay. All right. Any commissioners have any questions while Seth is here? This is a Seth, you'll stay. This is a Seth, you'll stay, but I'm just going to open and close the public hearing. I had another question for you, but I thought we knocked that away. I'm going to open the public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak to this? In that case, I'm going to close the public hearing. You know, I'm really big time on the sidewalks, and I understand, you know, I don't know what, this has got the, I know the nature park around it, but at some point, who knows, there could be a sidewalk from there to the soccer fields or something. I'm wondering about like a 20-foot right-of-way. Richard, do you have any?
Well, just so you know, and it has been approved by Outlet Day, you know we have a grant that is building a sidewalk from Sedgefield down County Road 13 to the Manley Road Soccer Complex, and we have a grant that's doing an infield on Manley Road. So there is going to be part of the city sidewalk network that runs adjacent to this, even though it's on it would be on the west side of County Road 13, you know, and my position is that even if the compromise was the 2 frontage lots have to do sidewalks along their frontage, then we could put a crossing in over to the new sidewalk on the west side, and those lots would have pedestrian connectivity through the whole system at that point in time. So
Yeah,
that's just my thought.
I think, you know, I'm always for sidewalks. I've spent my last, you know, quite a few hours, and the people have been real nice out there on Morphy from County Road 13 to Thompson Hall Road, getting the people to approve easements, because there's a single tax project we want to connect from 13 to, I think, what's the subdivision just to the west of Fox Hollow? Eddington. We want to connect to Eddington now that Eddington's connected to Fox Hollow, and then we want to connect from Fox Hollow to Thompson Hall. And we've talked to everybody but one person, and they've all been very, very nice. The guy with the trailer park's going to allow us to move the fence, but it's just such a hassle going through. And in this case, we're lucky that everybody's being nice about it, and everybody wants the sidewalks there. But I'm all for building the sidewalks when you can, if not, at least get an easement for the future reference. Otherwise, you're in a ditch or somebody's got a fence or a.
I mean, I don't think they would object to an easement in there, because like you said, along 13, if you built a sidewalk out in the right-of-way, you'd be almost in that concrete flume in the front, so I don't think they would object to having an easement.
But Richard, didn't you say that they were gonna put that sidewalk on the west side of 13?
We're gonna have a sidewalk that runs all the way from Sedgefield to Manley Road Soccer Complex, or Fairhope Soccer Complex, and the plans were approved today. So we are now authorized to go out and bid. So it's getting ready to be a reality, probably under construction by the end of the calendar year, completed by the spring of sometime in 2019. So what I'm saying is that, you know, a lot of times we hear the argument, well, we shouldn't put sidewalks that doesn't connect anything. Well, we're putting a new network in on County Road 13 that this could connect to, and when we do the infill on Manley, I think you could be able to go to the high school, to the middle school, throughout the whole system on sidewalks from this point. So.
One other thought on that, Richard. Isn't this going to be a roundabout in the next couple of years?
It has been identified, but it is a visionary project, and it is possibly subject to some highway safety improvement money for that in the future, but that is the future, yes.
Oh, I thought they got that.
Not this one, no.
Okay. Okay. All right. Commissioners?
Okay, let me ask one more question. Once again, would you think they would be agreeable to putting a 20-foot easement across the front?
Why would we need 20 feet? I mean, 10 feet?
10 feet,
10 feet would
an
be fine.
easement, satisfactory?
You can't build within 30 feet anyway. I was just, you never know what's going to happen in the
True.
future if they widen the road up.
Usually, 5 foot is the standard width of sidewalk we build,
Right.
so a 10-foot easement, it should be adequate, yes.
What do you think?
Talking about along 44?
44?
Yeah, I don't see,
Just in the front. I don't see any
I
reason
don't
to
have a
put,
problem.
try to put a sidewalk in that ditch either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my point is that how far do you have to get back to get on the other side of the ditch? That was why I was thinking of 20 feet.
Well, on 44, you're far enough back. Excuse me. On Twin Beach Road, there isn't much of a ditch out there. You could put it within the right-of-way, but if, giving a 10-foot easement, you're going to have a 15-foot utility easement anyway.
Right.
So
You're not giving anything
make
up
it
because
a
you're behind
sidewalk
the
easement
setback.
for the
You're behind the
future, too.
setback regardless, so you're not really
Yeah.
giving anything up. What about on 13?
Well, see, now on 13, you've only got that one lot, and if you've got a sidewalk across the street, then I don't think we would
Mr.
need.
Turner, I will tell you, 13 is a pretty bad embankment there, and it gets worse as you go south on 13, and there is a massive concrete flume that runs down there. That's why they didn't even talk about access to 13, because it
Right.
would be too expensive and too troublesome to try to cross that existing drainage way. So I concur with Seth that I just don't foresee us ever desiring a sidewalk down that side at this point in time because of the geography and the drainage there.
I see. I was just wondering if you got a bigger setback there if you go on the back side of that drainage.
Where would it take you though? I mean, you still gotta get across the ditch.
It would take you down to Manley Road and soccer fields.
Well, probably about 250, 300 feet south of there is wetlands, so I doubt you're going to be crossing that.
Then the ditch run all the way to the wetland?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, somehow you gotta get across, still get across the ditch.
So
If
if
you've
you're,
got a,
I'm just saying,
yeah, so if you were the family in lot
Cliff went
3,
across Fox Hollow, that saved the single tax corporation $130,000 for what we were gonna build going to that wetland. Spend on himself. I'm just saying, why don't we require on that side just a 20-foot easement, and if it helps in the future days, if somebody building a sidewalk, great. If it doesn't, then it didn't hurt anybody anyway.
Yeah,
you considering we're granting a waiver anyway, that seems reasonable.
My suggestion is
It could
say either build the sidewalks or give us a 20-foot easement. And if nobody ever builds the sidewalks, that easement doesn't hurt a darn thing. But having the 20 feet, if somebody at some point in the future wants to do it, and they can get on the back side of the flume, or after after the guy from the county spoke to our Rotary Club last Wednesday and seemed pretty confident that at some point at 44, there's gonna be a roundabout there at some point in the future, then maybe that changes the outlook. So I just think either build the sidewalks or give a 20-foot easement on each.
Well, and these are large lots, right? So we're not hurting their buildable area or anything like
30-foot
that.
setback regardless. We're not
Yeah.
taking a darn thing.
Well, on lot 3, I don't see a problem with a 20-foot easement.
What about lot 2?
Well, lot 2.
but you gotta get down to lot 3 before to get,
Right, I
So
mean,
you'd have to go through lot
I would
2.
put the same as on the front of the lots, a 10-foot easement on lot 2, because the ditch then is much further away from the
Okay.
lot line. Why they put it at an angle in there, I don't know.
Okay, but it's angling back towards.
Yes. It's angling kind of southeast. It gets really close at the southwest corner of the property. It gets really close, but up at the upper end, it's not as close, and a 10-foot easement should be fine.
you know why that thing is angled like that? Because surveyor that did that, had one shoe off.
Could
And
have
then how
possibly
y'all
been.
work?
Actually, I think it was the engineer, not the surveyor.
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Absolutely.
Motion, Mr. Chairman. Reference case number 18.31, Cora May Place subdivision. I move that we approve, would we call it a waiver at this time, at this moment? A waiver for sidewalks, but require a 10-foot easement along the fronts of, or along County Road 44, Twin Beach Road, 10-foot easement along lots 1 and 2, and 10-foot easement down the west side of Lot 2, and a 20-foot easement following on along Lot 3 on County 13.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any further, any opposed say nay.
Thank you.
Passes. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, I'll make one quick introduction. We have a new staff member.
Oh, yes, sir.
We filled our planning technician position with Mike Jeffries. Mike's here with us tonight. Mike's got a degree from South Alabama in geography and a minor in GIS, and we're glad to have him on board. The planning tech assists the building department with reviewing building plans and so forth for setbacks and zoning compliance, and also helps with other issues that we deal with. So we're glad to have him on board. So welcome Mike tonight. Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief because we have 3 amendments on the agenda. These are ones we have discussed before at length, so I don't want to go too far into it because you've heard it before. The first one is dealing with the resubmittals of denied preliminary plats. In your packet, you'll see the resolution in your packet. The only part that is changing in that body of language that's in there is under E. We've added 1 and 2. And just to make it brief, it allows someone to resubmit within the 180 days if they are addressing a comment or situation that the Planning Commission identified as a deficiency and they were denied upon. And so that is the gist of that amendment. And so we're asking for approval for that. As you know, we discussed this at the last couple of meetings, I think. So we're asking for approval of that.
All right. This is a public hearing, so at that point, I'll open the public hearing for item C. This is basically to remove the 180-day requirement for somebody to resubmit if they get a subdivision denied. Anybody in the public wish to speak to that? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this point and turn this item over to the commissioners.
I move that we approve this resolution.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, next item is D on your agenda. It is relating to Article 5, Section H, regarding multiple occupancy projects. As you may recall from the past couple of planning commission meetings, there was a discussion about green space in the MOP projects. And so in this amendment, the only thing that's been added is G, where it says each site plan shall comply with the green space requirements of Article 5, Section C hereof. And so it does include the green space requirements in there now, but previously, as you know, it did not. And so we're asking for approval of that as well.
I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for item D. This has to do with green space for multiple occupancy projects in the city of Fairhope. There was some question on those in the past, and this simply clears up that they are required to meet the same green space requirements as other subdivisions. Does anybody have any issues with this in the public? If not, I will close the public hearing at this time and turn this item over to the commissioners.
Motion, Mr. Chairman, resolution number 2018-02. Move that we approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Got that? All right. Any further discussion?
Just a quick question. When they do the green space standards, do we have, like, we call it our city arborist or our landscape architect, do they review those specifically for the green space? I mean, sometimes I see this green space, and they put plants in there that can't possibly sustain themselves, you know, they're gonna be dead the first winter they go through or the first hot summer. Do we have somebody that reviews that specifically for the green space?
Yes, we do. We do. All projects are reviewed by Richard's staff as well. You know, answer that question if you want.
And let's be careful, the ordinance specifies.
I can't hear you, Richard.
What we review is that there's a landscape plan, but we're reviewing those requirements of street trees, okay? For example, you know, a landscape architect can design an entrance feature that has all type of plantings. That is not required by our ordinance, so we don't review that. We are only reviewing landscape requirements that are set out. Again, in a green space,
Okay.
it's, there are certain things like that must be either vegetated or sodded so that there's no, disturbed soils exposed and things like that. But again, and Nancy kind of is pretty much rides herd on this, what we are reviewing is there is a calculation for street trees, and we are reviewing that. A green space does not have street trees in it. So understand is that what they choose to plant is really the developer and his landscape architect's decision. We're not reviewing that. We're reviewing specifically what the ordinance requires, and that is, the number, the sizes, the location, and we do have specimens that they can choose from, and we will give free advice to those specimens as well.
Because the
But-
reason I ask is, Fairhope is kind of known for its green space, its trees, its flowers, and so forth. And so as we're setting ourselves up with a whole bunch of new development, I'd really like to see this follow something along the lines of this is going to be pretty green, these new developments as they come along. And I think that the review you're doing is fine. I know you can't mandate they use certain things, but there are certain practices, putting trees in places where they're just not going to survive and that sort of thing. I just hope that we look at that.
Well, again, what we have to do, our job is to be able to stand up for you and say the applicable ordinances for this application,
Right.
the minimums have been met. And as I understand, in the green space portion of it, it talks about total area that has to be achieved, and it talks about location. As far as I know, it does not get any specific specifications to what is planted in that green space.
Okay.
Just to kind of speak to that indirectly though, aren't we requiring maintenance agreements for subdivisions with green space so that we have some idea of how it will be maintained? in
Street
perpetu-
trees.
Yeah, okay,
I mean-
but not green space?
Well, no, the maintenance agreement is the operation and maintenance of the stormwater system,
Stormwater,
okay?
Okay,
There is some language in our regs that addresses the fact that we have a 2-year watering requirement during that maintenance bond period. They have to water the plants, take care of the plants during that period.
that was kind of my question, is if we're
Yes.
requiring the plants to be installed, we want to make sure they don't die in the first 6 months and never get replaced.
There's a 2-year warranty on them, okay? And the assumption is that when we release the bond and accept them at 2 years, just like we do the roads, is that they're in good health and thriving, so.
Okay.
But from that point in time, the maintenance that we take on is the maintenance of the street trees, because that's the public right-of-way. The common areas are private to the development and are owned and enjoyed for their use, and we do not regulate or tell them how they have to plan it or
So it's just stormwater that they
landscape
have
it.
to show that they're going to maintain.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? In that case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, the next one on the agenda is E, and this is something we've talked about for several months now. It's regarding pre-application meetings, and what this proposal outlines the process to where before a major development, a subdivision development, a village development, and MOP project is submitted, they're required to sit down with staff to go over the requirements and start a dialogue early on in the process with staff before any kind of design is being done. And so this happens a lot informally now. Almost always it happens informally. This would make it a requirement for all people to do this, come in for a pre-application conference, but also the next step in that process would be to hold a community meeting with the adjacent property owners to get feedback early on in the process from the adjacent property owners, and then they would then submit their application to begin the review process that we go through. And so this amendment kind of outlines that process, and as you may recall, we've talked about this before, and it sort of tracks along the same methods that we have discussed. So we're also asking approval for this.
And y'all did this in Walton County, didn't you? And it worked out well.
Yeah, at first when I first saw this, when I started over there, I didn't say that seems like a little bit of a waste of time, but what I found is that a lot of the minor things they were able to catch up front by just having a dialogue with people, and they were able to go back and alter their design or design their project to mitigate some things that seemed very, very simple, but was very important to a lot of people. It's not going to solve every single problem, but it does create a dialogue with the community. I think many times when you have a public hearing, the dialogue is difficult then because the site's already been designed. So when you come here for a public hearing, there's been money expended and there's plans that have been engineered. By doing the community meeting early on, it allows you to build a dialogue with the adjacent property owners and try to solve problems prior to getting to a point where you've designed everything and you're in front of a body like this. And there's a place to come. It's still a place to have a public hearing, but what I found was a lot of the small issues and a lot of other issues were handled early on in the process. And so I think it made for a better project and also a good communication between the developers and engineers and the adjoining property owners.
Yes, thank you. All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for this item. Basically just requiring a pre-meeting conference between the developer and the community members in that area. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn this item over to the commissioners.
Motion, Mr. Chairman, resolution number 2018-03. I move that we approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? In that case, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Mr. Chairman, because we are midway in our submittal process right now, this will not take effect until the next full cycle of submittals. And so we won't, if you're in the process now, we're not going to require you to do all these things until the next full cycle of review starts. So,
Green space standards that we're going to discuss that at the next meeting, correct?
No, if we could discuss them briefly tonight, and I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. What you have in your packet next is under old and new business. As you may recall, we had a discussion at the last meeting about the green space standards, the design, the amount. And so we tried to take in all the comments that were made at the last meeting by the Planning Commission. And I believe those are reflected in the changes that you have here. And probably the major issue is the requirement to provide open space based off of number of units or density. The more dense the development, the larger area of open space. The less dense development, the smaller area of open space or green space required. The theory behind this is when you have very, very small lots, the offsetting factor is you have more open space and green space to enjoy. The larger the lots, you have more private open space on your property in your backyard. So that's the theory of this kind of a sliding scale based on density providing open space. Other things we addressed was the eligible green space. Golf courses, 50%, can only be counted for green space in the golf course. Hard surface areas can count up to 25% of open space. And other issues dealing with how the open space is arranged and where it's connected to. So, Mr. Chairman, this is just for discussion only. If there's some other things we need to add, we'd be glad to do that. Just want to get your feedback on the proposed changes.
I read this before the meeting, and I think y'all hit it absolutely on the head perfectly. The only thought, and I'm not real up on this, I don't know if I'm correct or not, but just one item I'll just throw out there for kind of point counterpoint that I could go either way on is where you have retention and detention or similar holding basins are not included in green space. Maybe to encourage people rather than to put the retention and detention ponds in the back behind a fence where we know they get really grown up and filled with weeds and cottonmouths, et cetera. Maybe we give a little bit of credit for a retention pond if it's considered an amenity with a little dock or something.
Okay.
Maybe we give like 25% or 50% or whatever you all think
Okay.
is fair. If the actual retention pond, like some of the places you see, they're kind of back behind and hidden and they're not really utilized. Other places, there's a dock on them and people are out there all the time
Right.
having a drink or fishing or.
Like the waters, for example?
Yeah, the waters is a
Well, or
perfect
even
example.
dry rain gardens could be a really nice part of the landscaping. It's how to word that, because I think it would be great to encourage those stormwater features to become amenities. but it needs to be designed as an amenity, not I'm going to put my ditch up front.
And Mr. Chairman, that part has been in the ordinance. We have not changed that, but we'll certainly go back and look at that. It's a great
We don't want
idea.
to open Pandora's
Right.
box and try to give people a little wiggle room
Yeah.
to, say this retention pond's
Yeah.
my green space. But on the other hand, if we can encourage them to try to make the retention pond be attractive, one thing we've learned is when those retention ponds are out front, they're used and they're utilized, people are fishing in them and sitting around
Mm-hmm. Right.
them. Generally, the owners association wants to take care of it. If it's in the back behind a fence, a lot of times,
Right, it gets forgotten about.
They're
Right.
like, put a lien on us, we don't care.
Right.
We don't care, it's filling in and grown up.
Exactly. One of the things we'll try to balance is the need for green space that you can that you can go to all the time.
Yeah.
Cold, warm weather, whatever it is, and so we'll find that happy balance trying to do that, and also take into consideration some of the dry ponds and those issues like that. So we'll go back and look at that as well. Anything else that we need to address that we have not addressed in here? As you know, the ones that are bold and underlined are the changes. If it's not bold or underlined, it's the existing language.
I had some questions about the golf course, well, the hard surface and the golf course, both. I didn't know if there was any other, sports utilization of landscape other than just golf courses. If we're covering, if there's a more general word than golf course, or, I just question that. I mean,
Okay.
there's only so many golf courses you need in a community.
Right. Yeah, and what I was looking at some best practices from some other areas that I was reading through, and that seemed to be a common kind of theme. And in looking at that, the golf courses, it's open space, but it's not usable unless you're out there paying a fee to be on it. Now, that was kind of the rationale. It does
Yeah.
provide open space for scenic and those kind of things like that. But if you want a different term to describe that, so it's more inclusive of other things that may fit a similar category as that, we can certainly do that. But again, the main gist of that is golf courses many times are used as open space, but you really can't go out there and walk on it anytime you want, or else you might get hit in the head with a golf ball.
Well, so are playing fields allowed?
I mean, as
Or
it
a
would
soccer
stand right
field?
now, they would be.
Okay.
They would be. Now,
But normally playing fields are going to be turned over to a municipality.
yeah. Now, if we're talking about Bay Bear Stadium, no. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's something that we can clarify. If it's got to be, I mean, if we want to put some kind of
If there's a-
caveat to where there's a difference between one that's, that you can utilize without a fee.
The town green where somebody plays croquet or
Right,
volleyball
right.
versus, or
Right.
whatever.
As opposed to a for-fee type use of it.
Yeah, it seems like the ability to access it is the key with
Right.
stormwater and the golf course.
Mhm.
And then I did just kind of question the 25% seems like a high percentage to allow for hard surface. I understand an allowance for sidewalks and plazas, but a quarter of it, and if, maybe there's precedent and that, if that's been used successfully in other places, but I wanted to just kind of
Okay.
take a hard look at that.
And was just a thought we threw out. Again, after looking at a lot of the best practices, information and reports and so forth, those were some of the sort of the common themes. I'm not stuck on that. Obviously, if that's something we want to change, we can certainly strike that. But there are times when you do get into areas where you have a lot of the hardscape, which, it's great for, again, you're trying to balance all these different uses. It's great for sitting and socializing, but it's not great for, activities that require, grass.
Well, and if you had
Picnics,
a hardscaped plaza that still had tree wells and had a tree canopy, to me, that's green, that
Right.
would be, check all the boxes in terms of legitimate green space.
Yeah,
It's
and-
just vertical and it's
Right.
not sod, but,
I think what we're trying to encourage if you look at this, we're trying to encourage multiple type uses. Not just, we're going to put, 10 acres here and just leave it. We're going to try to incorporate different little town square, a little square, grass, whatever. We're trying to encourage multiple uses without saying you got to do multiple uses. We want to leave it a little bit flexible, but also through our regulations, sort of encourage different sort of uses on property.
I was smiling because I just got a mental picture of somebody putting a squash court out somewhere in the green space, which would be pretty cool.
I'm sorry, would that include clubhouses and swimming pools of the hard?
Yes, it
surface?
would. That would be included in that.
Tennis
So
courts.
we'll go back and look at that too and see if we can.
Tennis courts could be considered that, basketball courts, things like
Right.
that.
Well, and if there are any precedents that some percentage of that hardscape be shaded, with trees or other features, that would soften it, or it might complement the other goals. So y'all are still kind of massaging this language
We
a
are,
little bit?
right. This is
Okay.
not for adoption, this is just for comments and suggestions, and like I said, we'll go back and work on it again. I think this is a very, very important part of the subregs, and we want to make sure we get it right, make sure we're meeting the intent and the goals of what the Planning Commission has for us. And so, like I said, we'll go back and sort of massage it again and bring it back to you again. We won't ask for adoption until you all are comfortable with it, and so we'll have a chance to vet it again after we go back and make some more changes.
Okay. So I know everybody's ready to go home, but I do appreciate that y'all added the green belts and greenway corridors, and I at the last meeting said that I was going to do some research and look for precedents, and I didn't do that, and I'd still like to look a little bit to see if pollinator pathways and wildlife, corridors, and see if there are any examples that we could draw from, and if I find those, share
At
them.
one time, when the colony at the Grand came to us, there was supposed to be one. I'm not sure. There's been so many 10,000 changes, if that ever,
A wildlife corridor?
not just totally wildlife, but there was supposed to be kind of a corridor that went through the whole area with the pedestrian. It was supposed to be utilized by people inside as well as outside. They've pretty much fenced it off, including the pedestrian, and that's something we need to look at. We might need to start requiring that they put sidewalks outside of the fence if they're not going to allow, public inside. That's one thing that we were not led to believe, but we were told that there was going to be pedestrian connectivity when we allowed in that zoning that, that they put the gates up. We allowed that based on pedestrian connectivity, which we don't currently have. That's off the subject, but there's supposed to be a pedestrian connection that went all the way from the high-rise condos all the way to the Grand Hotel.
Right. We would be happy to look into the connectivity issues if there is a desire by the Planning Commission. There are many, many connectivity standards that you can utilize if that's important to the Planning Commission.
Whenever our national people have come in and given us advice through the years, they've always said connectivity is the most, Nancy can say this, they've always said connectivity is the most controversial thing, but the most important thing that we
Right.
do. Because if it always hurts somebody. Somebody's always hurt by it, but overall, people are helped by it. But because somebody's going to be hurt, it becomes controversial. And you see so many cases when it really helps people. But, like over there, at one point, we could have had Rock Creek connected to the Publix, where they wouldn't have to get out on the 4-lane.
Right.
And, it's just amazing when you think of how much safer it is for the people in Rock Creek to be able to get there that way, and how much it drops the
Traffic counts.
the
yeah.
traffic counts. But Lord have mercy, you think, talking to some of
Yeah.
the subdivisions people in between, even Rock Creek, when you talk about the connectivity, it's like, oh my gosh, there goes the neighborhood.
And Mr. Chairman, I think you're exactly right. That's not uncommon to Fairhope. That's a lot of different places I know deal with that issue with connectivity, and you can even put a sign up, a future thoroughfare, and people still don't want it. But I think, once it's there, and if it serves a purpose like you were talking about, I think it's one of those things you got to fight it in the beginning, and then people will get used to it and get acclimated to it, and then we'll learn to like it and learn to use it. That's just, if you look at the old pattern of Fairhope from the original single tax colony plats. It was full of connectivity. It would meet any probably connectivity index that people require. Some cities require an index. You have so many connectivity points based on the size of the property and so forth. If you look at some of the old plats of Fairhope, and even go look at the old plats of some of the other cities around here that were designed in the early 1900s, that was important to them. And it probably had a functional purpose rather than just trying to meet a goal. But I think that as time has gone on, we've kind of deviated from that, as we've done a lot of things in the planning field where you kind of get away from the old pattern of development. And now a lot of places are going back to that. You go to some of these new developments, and they're trying to replicate the old downtowns like you used to have, and the old village-type centers like you used to have. And so we'll be glad to look into that and bring some information back to you. We'll look at some of the best practices and just bring it back for a discussion item at some point in time in the future.
Yeah, people, when 13 was connected, and then at the same time, the Single Tax Corporation built that Troyer Booth Road connection, the Greeno Road traffic dropped 8% from one decade, 10 years later. I'm sure it's back up now, but it's just, it just shows you how much of an effect connectivity can have.
Well, and also, as you said, it provides multiple ways to get places. You might have an accident, you might have a road being blocked, you may have construction, and it does provide multiple accesses. And I think it has a tendency to multiple accesses, but also slow traffic in some sense because of the connectivity. You're having to go through areas that you may have to slow down to go through. So I think there's multiple purposes.
I have a selfish request, and we add utilities to the definition. And I don't know about drainage. Sometimes if you have a development that has drainage coming through it from above, there may be a need to have some drainage connectivity as well. Because the next subdivision up will have a detention pond. It'll have to have some place to drain.
Right. Well, from the utility standpoint, we know a guy we can work with to get that language.
Thank you.
So.
He won't be available much tomorrow, but the hurricane has worn me out.
I bet.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and again, we'll go back and make these changes and bring it back again for discussion. If you have anything in the meantime, feel free to call us. We'll be glad to talk about that. Yes, as you know, we do have a field trip planned. Next some of you are going to go on that, and we will be in touch with you between probably tomorrow about the arrangements getting over there. I do think it'll be a good trip, but we'll be in touch with you with our arrangements of how we're getting over there and so forth. We'll be going to Rosemary Beach. I think we're going there first or second. I forget. We're going there first, and they have some, believe it or not, they have some similar problems we have with parking, and they had some unique ways of how they've handled parking, and so we're going to look at some things like that and some mixed use, and I think some things that are pretty creative. Of course, they have their problems. It's not perfect, so we'll get a chance to see some of the issues that they've had, and maybe we can kind of avoid. But also, we'll be going to Seaside, and Rick Hall, who is one of the foremost transportation planners in the new urbanism movement. He was one of the original designers of the transmission system in Seaside. Will be giving us a tour and talking more about street type, street width, and things like that. So I think it'll be very beneficial to in traffic calming and all those kind of things. I think it'll be very beneficial, and it'll be a little bit of a long day. It's a long way over there and back, but I think it'll be beneficial.
I tell you, on different trips I've taken in the past, I've learned so much. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I strongly suggest anybody who can go to go.
Yeah, and we'll probably give you a little information before we go over there. We'll probably provide you a copy of the plans for Rosemary Beach and maybe a copy of the plans for Seaside. And the Seaside had very, very simple plans. It's amazing. Their regulating plans about 3 pages long. And so that was their development regulation, about 3 pages long. So, and so we'll try to give you a little information ahead of time so you can kind of be familiar before you get there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One thing I'd like to mention, maybe we're getting a lot of these requests for waivers of sidewalks like the one tonight. They come very, very often. And remember, we don't have to give the waiver, so it's not like we have to negotiate back and forth. We can either say, build the sidewalks or build the sidewalks, or, we want this or that. Between now and the next meeting, for homework, commissioners, drive down some of the roads like Morphe, Fairhope Avenue, some of the roads that have ditches, and count off 20 feet, count off 10 feet, and 15 feet. What I think would be nice for us to do would be, when we're going to give the waiver, just without much discussion, just say, yes, we'll give the waiver if you will do a 15 or a 20-foot easement for a future person to come in and build a sidewalk. The setbacks are typically 30 feet. Isn't a utility easement typically 15? Is that not correct? So if we set a 15-foot easement, they're not giving a darn thing up, because the building setback's 30 and the utility easement's 15. But I think it would be good for us to just say a standard, in cases where it makes sense, yes, we'll waive the sidewalks if you'll build, give us a 15-foot easement.
Yeah, I take that back. I think on the right-of-way, it's 10 foot, right? Nancy and I were looking at that yesterday. On a side lot line that's not adjacent to another lot, it is 15. It's 7.5 if you have lots side by side.
Okay.
That's how that reads.
But just look at it and see, because 10 feet's not a lot. If you have a ditch and you know, and you've got a setback, you know, it's really not that much. So just kind of look at it, because that way we'll be consistent whenever people come up. And, you know, my thought is, you know, I'm Mr. Sidewalk, my thought would be just a carte blanche, look, build it or 20 feet.
Yeah.
Who cares? You can like it or not. If you don't like it, build it.
I'd like to know more about our history of, you know, what, I mean, in the case that we were just granted the waiver and with the easement, there were large lots and probably homes, and not a developer with deep, you know, I could see hardship making sense, that there was a hardship, but that's a little subjective. So I'd love some more direction on what's a hardship and when we should grant the waiver and when we should just stick to it and ask for sidewalks. And that just due to, you know, my short history on this commission, it's
So,
useful to know
So Rebecca,
more.
are you looking for some kind of additional criteria? Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, that could just be informal discussions on how we've done it, but
Right, okay.
any more guidance would be helpful.
Okay.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
A motion to adjourn is never out of order.
That's all, folks.
All right, grocery store.